Scott McNair, injury attorneys, we fight for the win.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Overruled Podcast, brought to you by the Scott Vicnair Law Firm. This is David Vicnair, your co-host, along with my law partner and host, Brad Scott. Good morning, Brad. How you doing?
Good morning, David. How are you today?
I'm doing good. We have some interesting things to discuss this morning, Brad, so I'm just going to go straight into it. First of all, thanks to all our guests for listening. We've had a bit of a brief delay in hiatus this summer. I guess we'll blame it on the heat.
I'm going to blame it on the traffic.
We had a newsletter the other day that we sent out, and it was like David's top 3 VIX picks for staying out of the heat this summer in New Orleans. One was like stay inside. The other one was like leave New Orleans.
It's very sound advice. I've been doing those quite often.
So what I kind of wanted to, my topic for our show today, Brad, is both the Super Bowl coming to the city of New Orleans and the preparations for that, how it's impacting the city and the economic outlook for the city associated with the Super Bowl being here in next spring in 2025, along with the precipitous drop in crime that we have seen in New Orleans, which is far outpacing the national average as it relates to decreases in violent crime across America. I was reading both an Axios and a Times-Picayune article on this before the show, and New Orleans murders are down about 40% this year.
That's a lot.
A lot. And while the country at large, as I researched and kind of prepared for this topic, learned, has had a significant decrease in violent crime across major cities, New Orleans' decrease in violent crime, it may come to surprise you, is not following the national trend, meaning we are like double outpacing the decrease in violent crime in the national trend. So we're trending like down twice as much as other similar major cities in the United States are as far as decreases in crime.
That's an interesting stat, too, because we always hear about the bad news. We hear about the high crime rates and stuff like that. But, seeing a decrease that's outpacing the rest of the nation, that's a really good thing to be hearing about the city.
I think it's also important, being from a city, Thibodeau, which is like a bedroom community of New Orleans. We do have a lot of bedroom communities in cities that are not in the traditional suburbs. For example, when I say traditional suburb, I would mean like Kenner, Metairie, Gretna, Marrero, Covington, Mandeville, cities on the North Shore. But like even further into the bedroom communities, you get into like St. Mary Parish, Terrebonne, Lafourche, St. James, St. John the Baptist. There becomes this perception that I find in talking to clients, family, and friends in those other outer parishes who still visit New Orleans to go to dinner, who visit New Orleans to go to Saints games, Pelicans games, concerts, that the city is like very, very unsafe. And while we certainly have our own safety and crime issues in the city, and it's not the same safety level as you would have in like a smaller city, I think it's important for people to understand that like not only is the crime in New Orleans trending down, but double the rate of other similar cities.
Yeah.
And I can attest just anecdotally without statistics, like living here, truly, I think 2 or 3 years ago, like many other people who live in New Orleans felt, it just felt like since I moved here for law school, and I've been here since 2008, so a long time now, 16 years, and I consider it home. But since I moved here, it felt like 2 or 3 years ago when we were coming out of COVID and we were having those exacerbated increases in crime, vehicle break-ins, terrible armed burglaries at places in the city where you'd never had those types of crime happen. That was really waking people up and opening people's eyes to the crime problem. That was really, I think, the first time I felt some level of unsafe in the city, and that crime had kind of really gotten bad.
Yeah.
Right. So as somebody who believes in this city and lives here along with other people at our firm and team, I think it is important to highlight like what it is that's happening both in civic groups and in partnerships with the state that has contributed to a precipitous drop in crime, which is far outpacing what other cities are doing. And there's an interesting article this week on NOLA.com published by the Times-Picayune that highlighted when crime really got to like skyrocketing levels back in 2021 and 2022, there was a civic partnership formed of about 417. Like this is a really big coalition.
Big coalition.
417 different civic organizations that came together in a coalition to fight the exacerbation and spike in crime. I mean, so they certainly deserve some credit for taking a big bite out of this, as far as like the grassroots organizations on the ground who really partnered together and said, like, we can't have safe and good communities where people can have a good job and have a good life and their families be safe if crime is at this level. And so that was a big highlight of the article at the Times-Picayune wrote about, is that this coalition, really people from different walks of life, stripes, that came together to really fight this. And the other thing that really struck me, not to get into politics because we stay away from that on this show.
Try to.
Is really, our DA, Jason Williams, who we both know personally, a wonderful person and an incredibly intelligent lawyer, but a very different side of the political spectrum than Jeff Landry, the current governor, and the current Attorney General, Liz Murrell. But Jason's partnership with the state and the state police, and allowing both the state police to begin to have a troop here to support and supplement what the NOPD is doing as far as traffic stops. And I think this is like an important thing to understand, and we understand it from a legal standpoint, but I think somebody who doesn't go through the practice of law and understand what an attachment is and how a court of law actually subpoenas somebody who has an outstanding warrant or something, whether it be for their arrest or not showing up in court for a civil hearing and repeating to not show up. So if somebody if somebody's a suspect of a crime and there's a warrant out for their arrest and they can't be found,
They don't just show up on the steps of the police.
That's right. So a criminal judge would issue a warrant for their arrest. So there's an attachment that's put out. And the NOPD has a tall task ahead of them as far as like policing a major city. There's been a lot written about the decreases in retention of different NOPD officers and them leaving the force, which I think the new police commissioner who came in, Ann Kirkpatrick, that's another thing that this article was talking about 2 years ago. Her policies and convincing the city to fund additional bonuses and pay them more has helped in retention of NOPD officers, which then allows them to recruit more and train more and build back up the NOPD. But the state police have supplemented their force in New Orleans. The governor has provided a troop to help with traffic stops so that when people are stopped in traffic and there is an attachment out for their arrest, whether it be armed robbery or carjacking, they are catching them and bringing them to prison for their arraignment and going through the legal process, whereas otherwise they did not have the resources to catch some of these people and take them off the street. And in conjunction with Jason's agreement with the state to allow that to take place and the state police to supplement the NOPD, he has also received assistance from Liz Murrell and the Attorney General's office, where the Attorney General has essentially said, if you will give us legal jurisdiction over the people that the state police arrest in these situations, we will help the prosecutors in the New Orleans police, in the New Orleans prosecutor's office, Orleans Parish Prosecutor's Office. The Attorney General will prosecute these to take some of the caseload off of the DA's office.
More hands on deck in the situation.
Correct.
And it's basic math. I mean, if you're taking more criminals off the street, you have less crime.
Sure.
So all these little initiatives and these little things like this, they have the concept of what's called Kaizen. You're probably familiar with it. It's like, getting 1% better in a whole bunch of different areas has a big overall effect on things. And I think that's what you're seeing happening in the city. This coalition with the state, these other community organizations, stuff like that, we're doing a little bit better in a whole bunch of different things. And now you're starting to see in the data, which is extremely important.
Yeah, and I think it's a fair criticism that a lot of people will say, you can't just throw police at a crime problem, right?
No.
It can't just be police. It has to be a complete effort from education and allowing younger people to have a path of success and getting a good education, but also those community organizations on the ground, whether it be churches, civic organizations, philanthropic organizations who are living in these communities in our city and telling and preventing the crime from getting to where it is and showing people who are going down that path that there is a different way for their life and helping them and mentoring them and giving them routes to jobs and to better themselves and their families. And so I think it's a fair thing to say that has happened here. They haven't just thrown money at the problem. They haven't just thrown police at the problem. Like building up a better force and having more police is certainly a part of it, right? And having the resources to do that, but it also has to have a DA's office who's not overrun and can actually handle the cases that it needs to prosecute, and community and civic groups that are working with local officials. And then we have a new police commissioner who has, I think, by a lot of accounts, done a pretty good job. And so you have all these little things that have happened and a bunch of different stakeholders, both at the DA's office, the city, and the state working together to bring down crime. And you're seeing it not just come down at the national trend, but double the national trend.
And that's extremely important for our city. Our main industry is tourism. We need to attract people to be able to come to the city, to have these events, to have these conferences, to have these Super Bowls. It's such a big impact economically when these things happen. And if we have a reputation as a dangerous city, people aren't going to want to come. And we fought that for a long time. So it's really, really good for our environment, for our economics, for everything that this kind of stuff is happening. And to kind of go back to your point of, you just can't throw police at this problem. When you're hiring more police, you're throwing them at active crime. You're not stopping the crime from happening in the first place. So the more we can do from a community to get involved to kind of prevent these things and people's lives of going in that direction to begin with, you're decreasing the size of the problem for the future. And I think we're finally starting to see the effects of that. And this, I think it was actually showing up in this data that you're citing.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's because of the Super Bowl, it may be, but we'll take it.
Yes.
I mean, they've been working on it for longer than just in preparations for the Super Bowl. But I mean, the Super Bowl coming is going to be a big deal for the city. Both the state and the city know it. I mean, you look at the one of the things in one of the articles I was reading in preparation to talk about it was some commentary from both the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the mayor talking about, if you look at the economic impact and the television viewership, the visitorship on the Olympics and what it did for France. And it was like incredible. And now certainly the Olympics is international on a much different scale than the Super Bowl, but the Super Bowl is a big deal.
But people who wouldn't have traveled to Paris and France for a vacation now have seen it on TV for 2 weeks, and now they want to go there.
For sure.
So for a tourist destination, the best thing you can have is a national type event like that and look good for the event. And we're feeling a little bit of those growing pains right now in the city. I mean, I was complaining when I got here this morning. It took me 2 hours to get here.
From the North Shore.
Yes, so but we have so much construction and things and improvement going on right now. I think every street you turn down, something's happening on it. But that's all to give the city somewhat of a facelift in preparation for the Super Bowl. So we have a little bit of a little growing pain right now that we have to kind of deal with. But the overall economic impact, that's what we got to keep our eye on. We want to put our best foot forward when these events happen.
Yeah, and I think the something I was reading is that there's something like, there's going to be tens of millions of dollars that are spent both in infrastructure improvements and different things that are happening across the city right now to improve the areas that will have a huge impact from tourists for the Super Bowl. This morning you're getting the growing pains of that. And around where I live, there's a little bit of growing pains. There's a ton of road work happening, improving the roads and different infrastructure. We have a lot of hotels that are improving either through renovations or coming online, and a lot of projects I know that have been in development or shooting to open, so they will be open to be able to hit that time period, because there's going to be a huge surge of tourism and economic impact from the Super Bowl. But New Orleans has always been a tourist city. Like, people want to come here.
It's a very unique city.
It's the food, the culture, different place than most places in America in a good way. And so a lot of the improvements that, as residents we're going through the growing pains of dealing with are going to ultimately be good long term, and it's going to be incredible exposure for the city as we host. I think I forgot how many Super Bowls we hosted now, but I looked.
We have the record, I believe. Yeah, we've had the most.
It's a lot.
They want to come here.
People want to come here.
Yes.
So I think it just was important to highlight and talk about the things that a lot of people in the city have been doing to drastically bring down crime and improve infrastructure in preparation for the Super Bowl.
It's a good news event.
Yeah.
We want to celebrate those things when we can, because too often we turn the news on in the afternoon at 5 and 6 o'clock. You're going to hear all the bad things that are happening, and that's kind of what news is these days. And too often these types of things are completely overlooked. We're obviously heading and trending in the right direction. So we're doing something right. And the people who are taking the initiative to make this stuff happen, they need a pat on the back. They need our support and do more of it. Because I'd love to see the city, get to its grandeur that it once had.
Yep. Well, that's my topic. It's been a great discussion, because I wanted to highlight all the key stakeholders and the improvements that are being noted both nationally and locally, and as far as like the decrease in crime. And look ahead to an exciting time when we'll have the Super Bowl here in the spring of 2025.
And let's encourage you guys who live a little bit outside the city, who used to come all the time down here. Come back to the city. Come enjoy the restaurants, all the things that we have to do. Be a tourist in your own city, as they say. Now's the time to start doing that.
Yep. Well, thank you all for listening. This has been a great discussion and highlighting of the drop in crime in New Orleans in the upcoming Super Bowl. It's been a pleasure to chat about it with you, Brad. This has been David Vicknair and Brad Scott, and this is the Overrule Podcast brought to you by the Scott Vicknair Law Firm. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you next time.
Y'all take care.
Scott Vicknair, injury attorneys, we fight for the win.
Information is for illustrative purposes only and does not constitute tax, investment, or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal, or tax professional before taking any action.